I had to get to a point where I wondered if my frustration was really about Annika, about who she was as a person or who she was developing to be as a person versus what it was she represented. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of what she represented in that season for me was distance between you and I.
Yeah, I can see
that. In our marriage. She represented the mouthpiece of your ex, her dad. She represented the sucking up of time and energy. Right? And she kind of represented an ongoing neediness, and I didn't want to share. Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your step family from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork,
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of step family life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 47. We're closing in on 50.
Yeah, glad you're here.
Yeah, we're so glad you're here. And you know what? We want to start out with an ask. We need some feedback from you, and we need feedback actually in two different ways. The first one is not really only for us, but it's for other step couples who are seeking support. So when you leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcast or whatever platform that you're listening on that takes ratings and reviews, you're helping those other couples to find us and determine if we can bring value for them. Yeah. So if you haven't already, we would be so grateful if you would just rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts or again, wherever you're listening. Now, there's a second way that we would like to hear from you, and this one is primarily for us, but it's because we want to grow our partnership with you and bring the most value here on the show, and we have a new way for you to help us do that. So we've set up a very simple webpage where you can share your questions, your topic ideas, or your biggest challenges. And we're going to consider how we might be able to share some tips and strategies around your specific needs here on the show.
Yeah, because this podcast is for you guys.
That's right. Exactly. So to share your thoughts with us, it's really simple. Just go to mikeandkimcoaching.com/share. And we'll link to that in the show notes, but we're excited to hear back from you. And we want to partner with you, ensuring that we're really bringing you the topics and the solutions that you need right now.
Yeah.
All right. So enough of that. Let's get on with today's topic. And we're going to take a little bit of a different approach today. So for today, Kim's going to sort of be interviewing me about some of the challenges that I've faced along the way as a step parent, specifically around a topic that's hard for me to admit. And I'm guessing that there's a lot of other step parents out there that really don't like to admit that they struggle with this topic as well. Would you agree with that, honey? Yeah. You know, it's those moments or sometimes even seasons in the blended family journey when you as a step parent just don't really like your stepkids that much. I mean, I know you're not supposed to say that, right? We get bombarded with those cute little quotes on social media about how there are no steps, you know, just family. And there's a certain amount of pressure just to love these kids that we don't really have a history with. And sometimes it's hard for us to just manufacture that in the moment. And then we think that we're failing.
Because you can't do it.
Yeah, because we haven't really recreated the Brady Bunch, right? We're kind of dating ourselves, right? If you don't know what the Brady Bunch is, you're probably too young. That's all. But if you're old enough to remember that show, sometimes it feels like, man, if I can't make that happen, then I've completely missed the mark. But the reality is there's some days or weeks or even months that go by where a lot of step parents are feeling so discouraged that they're struggling just to tolerate their stepchild. They just don't enjoy being around them.
Yeah,
it can be really challenging. Yeah. Now, I know a bunch of listeners probably just turned this episode off, right? There seems to be, quite this broad spectrum of perspectives and experience around this particular topic. And I believe that we can really all learn from each other. I personally love it I don't know about you, honey, but when we get those happy stories about step parents who easily connect with their stepchildren and they create that close, loving bond with very little effort.
Yeah.
That's really encouraging to me. I want to know why. Like, what did they figure out? Or what was it about the child's history? Or what's going on between the two homes where the child's moving back and forth? Like, is there something we can learn from that? So I think that there's a lot we can learn. But there's also a lot to learn about attitudes and approaches from those who don't have that experience, right? That's not everybody's experience. And it wasn't my experience, not all the time. So if you're really struggling with negative thoughts or maybe some emotions that you've been having about your stepkids lately, maybe you're wanting to love them really well, but you're just having a hard time even liking them, then I want you to know today's the episode for you. You're in the right place. All right. So what do you say we dive in? I've done enough rambling.
Yeah. So before we dive into the struggles, I'm wondering, honey, if you would be willing to share just a little bit about what your relationship with my daughter Annika was like in the beginning, like when we first started dating and got together, and she was 5 at that time, because from my perspective, things seemed ideal.
Yeah.
Especially early on.
Well, that's the funny thing. Early on, when you and I first started dating, we were very intentional about not having me meet Annika or connect with Annika for a little while. And during that season, I remember you telling me several times, oh man, Annika is really hard to warm up to. She doesn't warm up to other guys very easily, because you dated a few guys before I came along. And in your experience, she just wasn't a connector.
Just a bit reserved.
Yeah. So I remember the first time that I was going to meet Annika, I was actually kind of nervous. And it was it was going to be about 10 minutes. And I needed a ride home from church. I don't even remember why. And you were like, oh, I can give you a ride home from church. And I was like, okay, that means I'm going to have to meet Annika. And we were, okay, well, here's my friend Mike, that kind of thing. It was just going to be a friend. But you also had another friend that you were driving that day. And so I ended up sitting in the back of the car with Annika.
I remember that.
And I mean, we weren't in the car 2 minutes before she was like, hi, I'm Annika. What's your name? And I was like, I'm Mike. And it was maybe a 10-minute car ride home. And she and I just had the sweetest little conversation that was simple and easy. And I don't even know why I was nervous. And I remember, I still can picture you like looking in the rearview mirror, like almost confused, like, oh my gosh, they're actually talking. And so that actually kicked things off really well and kind of easy, I think.
In the beginning.
Yeah. She and I felt like, I remember thinking, hey, maybe this will be like the Brady Bunch. This isn't so bad, right? Because at first we did click pretty quick, pretty easy and simple.
Too. Like I said, from my perspective, it seemed like things were really ideal.
Yeah.
So what happened?
That's a great question.
Things started out so well. When did that start to shift and change for you as far as your relationship with her?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that early in our marriage, I felt like things were maybe going to be okay, even though I saw little moments where, that was really uncomfortable. But we were 50-50 at that time with her going back and forth to her dad's. And so we had 50% of our time. And so we were sort of like, we often say blended family couples don't really get a honeymoon, but we sort of had a half a honeymoon, right?
Sure.
or half a honeymoon period. But so when she would come over, there were some times where I thought, oh, okay, here's some flags that are saying maybe we're going to need to put some work in. And I remember so we were married in March, and the very first Christmas, so about roughly 9 months later, remember that first Christmas?
I don't.
You don't remember the strawberry and waffles Christmas?
Oh yeah. Well, I remember that incident, but to me, it wasn't that big of a deal, even though it was a big deal. To you, I think it was really magnified because I was used to her behavior, whereas this was new to you.
Okay, yeah. So on our first Christmas, it was Christmas morning. There was a major meltdown, and it was over waffles and strawberries and cleaning up after. And I mean, it was a regular, typical blended family challenge that had to do with parenting and discipline and expectations. There was nothing out of the ordinary, but to me, it was like this moment of, oh my gosh, what have we done? And what have I gotten into?
For?
Yeah. And in that moment, I was really not liking Annika. Yeah. I was really upset.
Well, she
I was disappointed.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And you guys had a huge knockdown blowout. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, she was misbehaving and I was not handling it well.
Yeah. She was disrespectful to you. And I wasn't in line with how you were handling it. And it was just a big challenge. And that was probably the first time where I really said, hey, there's some work we've got to do here.
When you realize,
Yeah.
So from there, what do you remember from that point on?
That's a good thought. You know, again, I mean, I love Annika, and we definitely started off pretty well. And then we had bumps along the way. But I think where I really began struggling with being open and connected to her was when our mutual kids came along. You know, there were some great moments in there, some great family moments, especially when Phoebe came along, our first, and Annika was really cute with her, and there were great times in there. But also, one thing I didn't recognize when we were in the middle of it is when she was, you know, up till she was 7, she was an only child.
Yeah, she
and
was.
She had a couple years where she had her dad and her stepmom, and then you and I in our home all doting on her.
4 adults focused on her.
Yep. And then your ex had kids, and then we had kids, and all of a sudden she's like the mother hen of 5 other siblings between 2 homes. And things dramatically changed for her. Yeah. And so she, you know, to me, felt really self-focused. She was really demanding a lot of the time. Yeah. And I don't think I was prepared for that.
Yeah.
And that shifted my focus about what I thought I saw in her or what I was really struggling with. And it made me not like her some days.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were frustrated with her selfishness, basically. But she was a kid. She was a little person. So what were your expectations around that?
You know, what's funny is as I look back on it now, if I'm really gut level honest with myself, I think part of my issue was my own selfishness because it was her selfishness, which, you know, is kind of normal as a kid, and my selfishness of what I wanted for my marriage and for my family life that clashed.
Sure.
Because she wanted different things than I wanted, and we both were in a selfish mode.
Yeah.
And that brings up a challenge that I want to throw out to people listening, that it's time sometimes when we're feeling like we don't like our stepkids, it might be time to really examine what our frustration is about. We're so excited to let you know about something brand new we've created just for you.
We've realized that with so many episodes available here on the show, it might feel a bit overwhelming to find the topics that matter most to you. That's why we've created a simple tool for you to receive a personalized playlist focused on your current struggle or your biggest challenge.
That's right. It's called the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz. You'll answer just a few questions, and based on your responses, we'll email you a curated custom playlist of episodes that are specific to you.
This simple quiz will direct you to the most impactful episodes that pertain to you personally and keep you on track in your journey of discovery, learning, and growth. So, scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this episode and click the link to take the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz today.
Okay, let's get back to the discussion.
It's the root.
I had to get to a point where I wondered if my frustration was really about Annika, about who she was as a person or who she was developing to be as a person versus what it was she represented. And, you know, a lot of what she represented in that season for me was distance between you and I.
Yeah, I can see
in
that.
our marriage. She represented the mouthpiece of your ex, her dad. And sometimes I struggled with listening to things that came out of her mouth that I knew was rooted in the other home, especially while we were in that 3-year court battle with him. She represented the sucking up of time and energy. Right. And she kind of represented an ongoing neediness, and I didn't want to share. And so it was really, I mean, it's hard to actually admit all that and to share that. But when I really examine what was going on inside, there is a recognition that, you know what, I was probably just as selfish as she was. And our selfishness just clashed. Right. It's a little bit like the point we made back in episode 44. We talked about, we've been talking lately about, you know, trying to work with an ex and deal with an ex. And in that particular episode, we talked about our spouse's ex. So your, you know, in my case, it would have been your ex, viewing us as the enemy, not because of our personhood, but because of our position. And I think there were times where your ex really didn't like me, but probably not because of who I am, but simply because of what I represented. It's that same, very similar case here. It's just that we don't want to be judged as a person based on our position, right? And so we've got to be careful not to stay locked into this negative attitude about our stepkids because of their position, or those feelings of loss or frustration that sometimes they can represent to us. So I think that's a lot of what happened. And that led to some disappointments.
So you're saying that some of the frustration wasn't even about who Annika was.
That's true. That's right.
But simply her position. And if that's true, do you think that it's possible that sometimes you felt like you were competing with her for my attention?
You know, that is exactly what I felt like. I think I hear that from other step-parents too. And maybe we don't use that word, competing, but it does sometimes feel like we're competing with a stepchild. I wanted your attention. You're my wife. I had some dreams and ideas about what our marriage was going to look like. And it seemed like Annika was in the way of that sometimes. And it was just challenging. Now, I don't like to admit that. And I have to take responsibility for that. And ultimately, I'm the adult. And so I'm the one who needs to kind of figure out, okay, how am I going to navigate this in a way that honors you, that honors our marriage, that honors my stepchild or stepchildren, if you have more than one stepchild? How can I do this? And there are ways to do it. But ultimately, as an adult who's mature, hopefully, I have to take responsibility for this. So don't get me wrong as I'm saying this, because some listeners might be at this point going, yeah, you're right. That kid is in the way, right? But we've got to make sure that we're taking responsibility. But it feels like they're trying to interfere or prove that their relationship with their parent is more significant than our marriage, right? And usually it's because they're in pain. And they're struggling, and they're trying to figure out where everybody's role is and how to respond to it.
They're fighting for their place
That's
a lot
right.
of times.
Yeah, they are. We actually talked a little bit about how to loosen that competition mindset back in episode 26.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we can link to that in the show notes if you want to.
We even mapped out a really good strategy there. So if you're feeling that like you're having to compete with your stepchild, there's some things you can do to loosen that up.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, honey. So all of that makes a lot of sense, and I understand that. But how do you get out of that mindset?
That's right. We don't come on here just to whine and complain, right? Let's say, okay, how are we going to take action? What can we do differently? You know, I've been thinking a lot about that since we had this idea for this episode. And I know I've prepared a bit more than you have just so that I can be the interviewee, you know, I can keep it that way. And I've been thinking about that and trying to think about what I personally experienced along the way. And also some of the stories that we've heard over the years from step-parents who are really wrestling with this. And so I think I've narrowed it down to about 3 primary things that I've seen help move myself and other step-parents just a little bit closer to building more empathy, maybe some understanding for their stepkids. Because what I've discovered is when I can start with just a little more empathy and understanding that often leads to more acceptance, which ultimately lets me enjoy them a little bit more, lets me enjoy Annika a little bit more, and eventually then experience connection and just simply having more fun together. Like, there's been some times where Annika and I've had a lot of fun together, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah.
But it took some work to get there.
Sure.
I figured maybe we'll just talk about a few things
Okay.
that helped me have that fun. Yeah.
So before we go there, you mentioned empathy and understanding. And I just want to throw out that we have a lot of podcast episodes that focus on these things.
Yeah.
So if you want to grow in this area of understanding what your stepkids are going through and grow your empathy, please go back and look at all those episodes.
Yeah. On the podcast website, you can filter by one's called Kids Perspective.
Yep.
And go listen to episodes, or you can go and look for Kids Perspective blog articles, because before we were podcasting, we were blogging for a couple of years, and there's a lot of articles out there.
Yeah. So really take the initiative to learn.
Yeah, that's a great point, hon.
All right. So you said you had some key points here that you want to talk about. So what do you want to start with, honey?
Okay. I'm going to start with one. I've given cute little names to all these.
Of course.
So you know how I am with alliteration and rhyming and all that. The first one I call broaden, don't bundle.
Oh.
So here it is. It's really easy, especially when we're feeling frustrated, for us to focus on all the little instances when one of our stepchildren maybe makes a poor choice, or just simply by virtue of their personality or their quirkiness, they just simply annoy us.
They rub you the wrong way.
They rub you the wrong way. And it's easy for us to bundle those instances. Well, you know what? Yesterday she did this, and then last week she did that. And a couple of months ago she did this other thing, and it was like 4 years ago that she did that one thing that really bothered her. And you bundle all those things up, and you just hyper focus on this bundle of negative experiences. And every time another moment of annoyance pops up, then we laser focus. We'll add that one to the bundle. and that is where we go wrong. Because the truth about our relationship with a child, or with really anybody, is not centered on one moment of time, but it's over the broad spectrum of time. And that's what I mean by broaden. So sometimes we want to bundle and point out all those bad things, but we really need to broaden our perspective. And I think one of the things, this really helped me. One of the things that helps us to broaden our perspective and get rid of that bundle is to find reminders of the positive interactions, so that we can actually be more focused on the broad spectrum of our relationship with the child. So there was a time where we were out on like a little hike or a walk, or it was something fairly minor, but it was really good. We were enjoying time. I think the young ones were in a stroller or something. They were pretty little. And I remember Annika with her cute little smile just running up, and she handed me this little rock, and she's like, "Mike, I want you to have this rock." And I'm like, okay, it's a stupid rock, right? At first. And there was absolutely nothing special about this rock, except that for some reason, when I held it in my hand, my thumb fit right into this little pocket on the rock, like perfectly. And you probably remember the rock.
I've seen it.
I would be willing to bet for about 5 years. I have a little bowl that I throw all my keys and change and pocket knife and all that stuff into when I get home from wherever I am. And I put that little rock in there, and every time I would load up my pockets to go anywhere, I would always add that rock, because every time I reached into my pocket and my hand touched that rock, it was a reminder of a really good time with Annika.
A special moment.
And that helped me to go, oh yeah, there have been some really great times. We've had a lot of fun, and there's been laughter, and there's been all this stuff. And so that tiny little rock, for a number of years, especially through that season where we were in parental alienation court battle, you can go back a couple episodes and hear that story. Every time I touched it, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. There have been great times.
Yeah. It was a reminder of a sweet connection with her.
That's right. So if you're a step parent and you're struggling with just liking your stepchild, I would be willing to bet that somewhere along the way, there have been some moments of connection, laughter, fun, lightness, whatever it is, what might you do to broaden your perspective outside of this bundle of negative experiences and somewhere, somehow set up some reminders for you along the way?
Great. So that one's broaden, don't bundle.
Yep.
And I'm wondering, before we go on to the next one, you
Yeah.
just kind of mentioned personality type in
Yeah.
there, that personality type can be something that annoys a step parent.
That's true.
And you're smiling because that was definitely an issue between you and Annika.
Oh, yeah.
Can you just touch a little bit on that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Annika and I are wired so differently. Really,
I would concur.
you've watched that play out.
Yes.
And you know what? You have said one of the most wise things over the years, over and over. When I get frustrated and I'm venting or complaining or whining, whatever it is I'm doing that has to do with Annika, too many times I would maybe either compare her to me,
Yeah.
or I would, when I was her age, I was doing this or whatever. And you would hear that. And there were times where you patiently, well, sometimes you not so patiently, but most of the time
As patient as I could muster.
you would patiently remind me, Mike, Annika is not you. And that, as we learn more and more about personality types, and I look back on that, I go, oh man, so many times I allowed my frustration about Annika to really impact my emotions toward Annika when she was simply being who she was.
Yeah.
And especially those times where I was just annoyed by her, not that she was misbehaving, not that she was doing anything wrong, none of that. There were other times where she was just being her, the way she's uniquely wired, and I let it get to me.
Yeah.
That can be a big deal. And that's something that needs to be explored, I think, in just about every step family.
Yeah. And a lot of her unique wiring was that she was a kid that was struggling at the time and just really needed acceptance and empathy and love.
Yep.
But from your perspective, a lot of how she went about gaining what she needed was very annoying and
to me.
demanding.
Yeah.
So definitely personality types can play into this as well.
Totally.
All
So
right.
don't bundle those moments.
Yes.
Broaden your perspective
And
instead.
hold on to those sweet memories.
Yeah, hold on
sweet
to 'em.
moments.
That's right.
For sure. All right. What's the second one?
Okay. The next one I called grow, don't grudge. I can sometimes be pretty good at holding a grudge. I have a pretty good memory. And so I can point out all the things like I just said about the bundle. Like
Again.
I can bundle easily.
Again,
right?
I concur.
Okay. Now, we've got to remember that kids are developing and maturing.
Yes.
That's who
Their
we're dealing
works in
with.
progress.
That's right. And that means they're going to be changing and hopefully becoming more mature, more responsible. They might be more understanding. They might be more respectful. Those things are going to change over the years. And just because they act a certain way in their teenage years doesn't mean they're going to act the same way as an adult. One leader I've heard that I really like this quote says, it's always only just a season.
Right.
Like if things are going really well, be ready because it's possible things might change. If things are going horribly wrong, be hopeful because things are probably going to change.
The story isn't over.
It's not. That's right. And now we're 20 years in, and I've had this privilege of watching Annika grow into adult, who is now almost 25, and she's completely different than when she was young. So just a couple months ago, honey, after your dad passed away, and we took a road trip to go honor him, we got to have Annika go with us.
Yeah,
That was the first
awesome.
road trip that we had taken in 7 years together, all 5 of us as a
Right.
family. And I know there was a piece of me, and I'm guessing of you as well, that was kind of bracing for, oh boy, Annika.
A little apprehensive.
Yeah, she can be
The dynamics
challenging.
change.
And I was so pleasantly surprised by her maturity, her respectfulness, her engagement with the family, her willingness to not get her way the whole time. And I don't know about you, but I just had a lot of fun with her, even though it was a trip that was not necessarily about fun.
Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful now when I have that perspective and I look back and go, you know what? There were times where she was kind of a little brat, right?
Yeah.
But she's growing.
Yeah.
And if I keep bundling and then holding a grudge about that bundle, then what I'm doing is I'm actually keeping that person in my mind, that child in my mind,
Stuck in
trapped
time.
and
Yeah.
stuck in time, and I'm not allowing her to grow through the seasons. And if I approached our trip that way, then it might have gone a lot worse because my attitude would have been not so great with her.
She's not the selfish little 5-year-old that she used to be.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
And so really part of this grow, don't grudge is about keeping the long game in mind, right? Step parents, you're not going to help your stepchildren build a character of kindness, patience, and generosity when you're being unkind, impatient, or selfish. It's not going to happen. You have to go first and allow them to witness and experience what it's like to have someone be kind and patient and gracious with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to make a huge difference. And so we've got to grow, don't grudge, not holding a grudge, but going first and setting an example and allowing them to grow into the person that they're going to become.
Yeah. And anticipate that.
Yeah.
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 And, I think it's helpful in all of our parenting interactions, whether you're a bio or a step parent, to continually remind yourself that you're the adult. And you have the emotional maturity to kind of let the little things go and just not get sucked into a power struggle with the kids.
So you're saying on this one, bio parents struggle with some of this too.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
You're right. Yeah.
And it's so easy to get sucked into that power struggle because we want things to go our way.
Yeah.
But when we're focused on just getting them to comply and do things our way, it just doesn't work. Everything breaks down.
Compliance doesn't foster connection.
No.
Yeah.
So if we can realize and remind ourselves in the moment to show up with empathy and to get curious about what's underneath our kids' behaviors rather than putting forth all this effort to force compliance.
Yeah.
If we can do that, our interactions will lead to more connection and more care.
Good thing I'd never worried about compliance, right?
Never. But really, I do have to remind myself in
Yeah.
those moments when I'm just feeling frustrated, like I just want to scream, just do it.
Yeah.
I have to remind myself, you're the adult. You're not the child. Hang back. Go with empathy.
That's right.
Yeah. It's easier said than done,
It is. It is.
but it is helpful.
Yeah, good. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
All right. Do you have one more point?
I do. Okay. So we've talked about broaden, don't bundle. We talked about grow, don't grudge. And here's another one of my favorites, and that is tweak, don't freak.
Oh, that's a good one. Freak
All
not.
right. Here's that's right. Freak not. One of our pastors says that all the time. I love that. Freak not. So I want to challenge step parents to think about the small changes that can be made that might put us in a different frame of mind. So rather than getting, freaking out because I'm not getting what I want or because they're not complying or because they're not acting the way I want them to act, how can I tweak the tiniest little thing so that I can have a different frame of mind and maybe be more prepared to be that kind, patient, gracious person that I want to set an example of. So,
And that's so important because in a lot of situations, you cannot change that child.
that's right.
You can only change how you
That's
react
right.
and respond to that child.
And that's exactly what this Tweak Don't Freak is all about, is we're going to focus on the things that we can change. I'm going to say that again
Which
in a
is
few
good.
minutes. Yeah. So let's talk about a couple examples. So let's say you're finding yourself really frustrated because every time maybe your stepchild comes home from school or they come back from their other parents' home or just come in from playing in the backyard, their response to you is like the grunt, right? You get the minimal response or just complete, what's the word I'm looking for?
Avoidance.
Avoidance or whatever. Yeah.
Or they ignore you.
They ignore. There
Yeah,
you go.
we
That's the
hear
word I
that
was looking
one all
for.
the time.
Yeah, they just ignore me, right? And you have this tendency to ask them how they are, right? Walk in the
Yeah,
door.
we all
Like as
kinda do.
people, especially in North America, it's like, hey, how you doing, right? How was your day? We're always asking for those things that really sets people up to lie because a lot of times we don't want to tell them I'm having a really crummy day,
Yeah.
right? And
Fine.
step kids are kind of the same. Oh, yeah, it's fine. Right? So here's what a tweak, don't freak looks like. We want to brainstorm a way to engage them differently so that we have a different expectation or mindset in our own mind. So go
Yeah,
ahead.
because when you get ignored by a stepchild or a
Yeah.
child, it's hurtful. And then you're
Exactly.
angry and then you want to
Exactly.
lash out.
Exactly.
So you're setting yourself up
and
for
you
failure.
and you start holding a grudge and you start adding to your bundle. That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
bundle it
right.
up.
Yep. So here's a small tweak that you might be able to make to help you in this exact moment when that child is responding in a way that is less than desirable. Okay. You want to move from maybe having a question to making a statement. So instead of, how are you? Or how was your day? Right? Very typical things we say. Change your greeting to something like, hey, it's good to see you. Or, hi, I'm glad you're home. And now that tiny little tweak, that move from a question to a statement, helps you because you have no expectation of a response. Because it's a statement, not a question. And if you've formulated it for yourself, you already are going in not expecting a response.
Right.
So your disappointment might be much, much less.
Yeah.
And so that's just the tiniest little thing to get you in a different mindset so that now I'm not grudging and I'm not bundling this moment that I just yesterday had because I asked them how they were and I was ticked off because they grunted as they walked by.
Right. You're
Okay.
not expecting anything.
Exactly. So just a tiny little tweak.
Yeah. Yeah. You're
so
still,
that you don't freak.
and you're still doing your part to connect.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're putting yourself forward without the expectation that they need to respond to you in a
Totally.
certain way.
Totally.
Yeah, I like that, honey.
Let's talk about a totally different one. So let's say you're finding yourself just getting a lot of anxiety. You're getting all worked up the night before the kids are coming back to your place. They've been over at the ex's and now they're coming back to your place on, Saturday morning or whatever. And that night before or the morning of, you're really
Right.
anxious.
So you're preparing yourself to be second fiddle
Yep.
to having all of your partner's time and energy sucked, leaving nothing for you.
That's right. Here comes
and
this-
you're dreading it.
Here comes this energy sucker. I'm the stranded stranger once again.
I'm on the outside.
I'm on the
Yeah.
all of that. And
All
all
right.
that. Consider what might you do to just simply fill your tank right before you get there.
Oh, that's a simple tweak.
Yeah, maybe you can approach your spouse. Like if I would have said, "Hey, honey, what do you say we go out to a date night on Friday night?" And really, I want to get some time with you to feel connected because I know the kids are coming back on Saturday morning. And I'd love to just have some time to just remind me about our connection and our marriage. And then I go in being filled up instead of
Right.
being depleted. Right. Or maybe the connection you need is outside of the family. Like you've got some really close friend or somebody that you need to grab dinner with or coffee with them or something like that. Or you're someone who would need some alone time to
Yeah,
fill
some
back
self-care.
up. A good bubble bath or a book or a nice long nap or something like that. The point is, what's just one small, simple step that I can take, maybe that's going to energize me so that I come in filled rather than drained when the kids arrive.
So you're filling your own needs
Yep.
rather than becoming needy when the
Oh,
kids
that's a
come
good way
in.
to. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm filling my own needs rather than becoming needy. So you never saw me in a state of neediness,
Oh
did you?
gosh.
How have you described me before? Like a little puppy dog? Yeah,
Yes,
that's yes.
yes. Between you and Annika, I had two little puppies on my heels.
I'll admit it. So the thing is, that parents need to find one primary thing that they're just finding themselves frustrated with over and over again and ask, what's one simple, small thing that might be able to tweak so that my experience would be just a little bit better? And here's the rules kind of around this. Number one, focus on something you can do, right? I'm changing my greeting. I'm inviting my spouse to join me for a date night. I'm contacting a friend
I'm
or
taking care
drawing
of
my
my
bubble
needs.
bath, whatever it is. It's something I can control. And the second rule is I'm looking at it as an experiment. I'm going to try that tweak out a few times. I'm not going to try it once and go, well, I don't feel better, so now I'm throwing that out the window. I'm going to try it multiple times. And if the pattern is that it's still not helping in any way, then I'm not going to throw the whole idea out. I'm actually just going to find another tweak,
Pivot.
right? I'm going to pivot and I'm going to keep doing that tweak. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I like that.
So I really hope that, if you're a step parent and you've been struggling with this, like I genuinely do love my stepchild. I genuinely want to show up for them well, But honestly, I'm just struggling to even like them today. I'm hoping that these three things might connect with you of broaden, don't bundle. I'm betting you've got some time that has been fun.
Yeah.
We're going to grow, not grudge. So I'm not going to keep holding on to that grudge. And I'm going to remember that we're headed toward a new season.
Anticipate the growth and the maturity that will come.
Right. And I'm going to tweak, not freak. I'm going to just look for those little tiny changes that I can control.
Sure.
And if we can do these three things over and over and over again, we might find that we have a much more pleasant experience with all of our stepkids. So I really hope that that's been helpful for you. Any other thoughts or comments you want to toss in there, honey?
No, I think these are great. I think if a step parent can really focus in those three areas and communicate with your spouse.
Yeah.
I know it's hurtful. It's hurtful when Mike says that things about my daughter that he doesn't like. That was hurtful. But the more that you can communicate, get things up on the table and really work through them as a team. I mean, one thing that we've recommended to other couples that were struggling was let the step parent have some time off and the bio parent have some one-on-one time with their kids in the middle of a visitation.
Yeah.
So that lets the step parent
some of those
that's a
self-care
tweak.
things.
Yeah, they can go and hang
Totally.
with friends or do what they need to do to care for themselves and get a break from their stepkids that may be driving them nuts, and give the bio parent that much needed one-on-one time.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of things you can do if you're working together and communicating about what's going on.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
And bio
Thanks for adding
parents,
that.
try not to get your feelings hurt. I
You
know
know,
it's hard.
Just one more tiny tip along that line. Maybe invite your partner to listen to this episode with you.
Yeah, together.
And be able to express. I think it was honoring, hopefully, to you and to Annika in the times where I actually did well at expressing, look, I do love Annika and I want to show up well for her. And I'm also experiencing some of these frustrations.
Right.
It's not a but she's driving me nuts. It's and I'm also experiencing some of these frustrations.
Yeah.
So if you're struggling as a couple to figure out, like, your spouse is saying, well, what do you mean you don't like my kids, right? It might be a way to just say, how can I express this in a way that that shows love and honor to our marriage and to our kids, and yet still honors what I'm feeling?
Yeah. And maybe listening to this episode together will help you to understand that this is normal.
Yeah.
We hear about this all the time
totally.
from other couples. And in fact, it's reminding me of a quote. I can't remember who the quote is from. You'll remember. A parent looks at their child through the lens of love first. A step parent will look at that same child, their stepchild, through the lens of responsibility first.
And the view is very different. That's Heather Hetchler.
Yes,
You're right. Yeah, that's good.
And that's normal. That's reality.
That's right. Yeah.
So we've got to embrace it and work together to move beyond the struggles.
Totally agree with that. Hey, I hope this has brought you value today. And again, we really want to hear from you. Would you consider giving us a rating or a review? And don't forget to let us know what topics might be best to support you here on the show.
Yes.
And we've got a venue for you to do that now, brand new, over at mikeandkimcoaching.com/share. We really want to hear
Yes, we'd
from
love
you.
to know.
That's right. And with that, that makes this episode a wrap.
Until next time.